Welcome back, Geotech Masters. I'm so happy to have you join me again. In our previous session, we talked about the different variations of the standard penetration test and when it's best to use it, as well as when maybe it's not the right choice. Today, we are moving on to something very important, the equipment we use for the SPT.
Have you ever wondered how we actually create that hole in the ground to perform the test? What kind of machines and tools do we need? And how do we make sure the hole is good enough for a reliable SPT result? These are the questions we will answer in this video, so stay tuned. So, the very first step in performing an SPT is to create a borehole. This is basically a vertical hole in the ground that allows us to insert our sampling equipment and perform the test. According to the ASTM D1586 standard, any drilling equipment that can provide a suitable borehole at the time of sampling is acceptable. What does suitable mean here? Well, it means that the borehole needs to be clean and stable before we put our sampler in. We need to make sure that the soil at the bottom of the hole is essentially undisturbed, so our penetration test is performed on intact ground. The standard also gives us a general idea of the size of the borehole. It says that ideally, the borehole should have a diameter between 75 to 150 millimeters. If the borehole is much larger than this, say more than 150 millimeters, it might actually lead to lower blow counts during the SPT and require a correction factor. We'll talk more about these correction factors in a later video. As we drill, it's absolutely crucial to make sure that the borehole remains clean and stable. A clean borehole means we have effectively removed the soil cuttings from our drilling process, so they don't interfere with our SPT. A stable borehole means that the sides of the hole don't collapse or cave in, especially below the groundwater table in sandy soils. Once we have our